Hello, Manic Mercurian here. Today is Florida's birthday, so to speak. So I thought it would be fun to read the birth chart of Florida. I thought this would be fun anyway, just because Florida is such a dynamic state. It's also my home state since I've been living here since September of 2020. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things going on with this state. It's so dynamic, and I'm sure I'll get into all of it here shortly. So yeah, let's begin. Let's take a look. This chart will be for Monday, March 3rd, 1845 at 10:45 a.m. in Tallahassee, Florida. So this is, marks the time and date of the statehood of Florida. And as we can see here in the chart, whoops, let me go up a little bit here. Okay, so Florida has Sun in Pisces. That makes sense right off the bat, right? And then Moon in Capricorn, Gemini Rising. And I think just with the big three right here, there's already a lot to unpack, and it's already so fitting for what we know about Florida, about what Florida is famous or maybe infamous for. Okay, so Sun in Pisces, I mean, that to me makes so much sense. Pisces is, kind of a wacky sign, kind of crazy at times, can be a little bit out there. And it makes sense with all the kind of crazy stories we hear from Florida. I feel like that seems to be fitting. Also, with the elemental, influence, Florida is known for, well, for one, it's a peninsula. It's literally surrounded by water, so it makes sense it would be a water sign. But also not just the ocean and the Gulf, but it's also a very humid state. There's a lot of water in the air. It's very kind of warm. And Pisces is a warm sign as well. Even that, Pisces is, of course, technically winter, but the energy itself is a warm energy. It's alluding to spring, being the last sign of winter. So it makes sense it would be a warm water sign, but there's a lack of structure with Pisces that there's which kind of leads to the craziness, I think, or the openness as well. Okay, but not only that, there's also there's the ocean, the Gulf, there's the humidity, and then there's also the tropical storms that bring a lot of moisture as well. The hurricanes and such. So I mean, I feel like Pisces, it just makes a lot of sense all around. Kind of crazy, kind of out there, huge water influence. So that makes sense right off the bat. Similarly, or maybe not so much. Capricorn Moon makes a lot of sense as well, and yeah, I mean, it makes sense that Florida has Gemini rising with Pisces Sun. So I think those two kind of show the sort of libertarian aspect of Florida. There's almost like a lawlessness in a way, of Florida. It's very kind of free market, pretty, I don't know, pretty loose regulations and rules on things. So Gemini rising is so free and unstructured, and Pisces is too free and unstructured. Both are very open energies. They like to just kind of do as they please, be spontaneous, kind of go wherever the wind takes them, so to speak. So that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of a libertarian, Wild West type of dimension, type of region. But then on the other hand, you've got Capricorn Moon, which is very different. So there's this very conservative, very grounded, surprisingly grounded aspect of the state, which I think would get overlooked. And it makes sense that this aspect of it would get overlooked because the moon is in the eighth house. So for one, this would be something that would take a long time to develop. And it makes sense, Florida did take a long time to develop. For the first 100 years of its statehood, hardly anyone lived here. There were the natives, which were driven out by white people, but for most of its, the beginning, the first 100 years of the history, there were just a few kind of farmers in the northern part of the state, and other than that, it was mostly uninhabited until after World War II. So it makes sense with the Capricorn Moon in eighth house. This state took a long time to develop into what it has become today. And then also, like I was saying before, there's this very conservative side to the state that's a little bit understated, maybe. That's like we know Florida for the kind of crazy, wild stories. So that's definitely there. We can see that in the Gemini rising and the Pisces sun. But there's also that, very conservative, traditional side of Florida as well that we see in the Capricorn moon. Also, the Capricorn moon brings an earth element, an earth focus. So it makes sense, this state has a kind of agrarian upbringing, agrarian history. And also, there's a lot of nature here as well. There's an earth focus. I wouldn't say it's the most environmentally focused state, but there is, a lot of greenery here. There's a lot of nature and, abundance with nature, I guess you could say. And then also, like I said, just the focus on farming and agrarian society. So that, just the big three, I feel like is so perfect, especially the combination of the three. Being very conservative and traditional on the one hand, but then also kind of wild and open and libertarian on the other hand. It just so far is making a lot of sense to me, I feel like. But let's see. There's a lot of other stuff to unpack here too. So let's go to, there's actually a surprising amount of Aquarius placements. And at first, I was initially kind of surprised by this, but when I just kind of thought about it a little bit, I thought it, I think it does make a lot of sense. So, okay. So there's Mercury, Venus, Neptune, Midheaven, and Saturn all in Aquarius. So there's more placements and planets in Aquarius than any other sign. So, I mean, the focus is a lot on Pisces, Capricorn, and Gemini, since those are the big three. But there's a huge Aquarian influence as well. So this would suggest a more technological aspect of Florida, which, I mean, on the one hand, it seems kind of unfitting or maybe surprising. But then, NASA is kind of based here. We've got the shuttle launch at Cape Canaveral here. So that does make a lot of sense, and this would actually shape the reputation, especially on a world scale. With Midheaven and Aquarius, this would be what Florida would be known for, at least in part. Known for a kind of technological aspect. So so like I said at the beginning of this video, there's a lot happening in this state. There's the conservative farming aspect. There's the kind of crazy open libertarian wild aspect of it, and then we've also got this huge technological aspect that you can see with all these Aquarius placements. Let's see, and especially that Mercury in 10th house Aquarius, this would indicate that well, for one, Mercury's in a very strong place here because it's the chart ruler. Remember, Florida is Gemini Rising. Mercury rules Gemini, so Mercury is the chart ruler, and it's in a very prominent place as well, up at the top of the chart, up here in the 10th house Aquarius. It's not in domicile in Aquarius. I wouldn't say. Some people will say it's exalted in Aquarius. I personally don't. However, Mercury is definitely in a very strong position in Aquarius, and especially at the top of the chart here in the 10th house. So anyway, what all that means is this state would be known for an informational or technological, I don't know, skill set or, influence theme here. And really, all these planets kind of clustered in the 10th house, it shows a prominent reputation. And now I'm not trying to say really good or bad. Actually, let's take a look at that. So, I mean, with Sun and Venus, these are kind of benefic energies. I would say this does contribute to a really positive reputation. Now there are other aspects which can kind of muddle things a little bit, and I'll get there. Like I said, there's a lot going on with this state, but yeah, Sun and Venus in the 10th house, that this indicates a really prominent reputation. So I'm getting a little distracted here, but Mercury in the 10th house, it shows a kind of technological, informational reputation, a reputation for being known for technology. That type of focus, which I talked about with a lot of it is the space aspect of it. But I think this does indicate maybe a potential for future endeavors with technology and information as well. Maybe right now, to me, in my knowledge, it seems like it's mostly just space related, but this to me indicates maybe a potential for more in the future. Okay, let's see. And then also I was getting onto Sun and Venus in the 10th house. Sun in the 10th house would just show a generally prominent, outgoing, what's the word? Like exhibitionist type of personality. So it would be, it would show that the state would get a lot of attention. It would be known, kind of far and wide, which makes sense because, for one, Americans are very familiar with this state. About half of all Americans have been to Florida. And then also it's the third most populous state. So when you combine just those facts and figures, and then plus the kind of openness, the craziness, the wildness, this state definitely does have a reputation. It's definitely known far and wide. So that makes sense with the Sun in 10th house. It's not a shy state. If we can kind of personify it, it wouldn't be a quiet or shy personality. It would be someone that would be well known. Okay, and then Mercury, we talked about that technological reputation and influence, especially with the midheaven. Venus, though, Venus shows that this place would be known for some type of abundance or pleasure, and that makes a lot of sense. A lot of people come on vacation or for retirement. There is a lot of wealth. There's a lot of poverty too. I mean, there's a lot of both. We could see. I think the poverty would be more so like Moon in Capricorn is very humble, very hardworking and agrarian. There's that aspect of it. But then there's Venus in 10th house, which is more flashy, more this place would be known for some kind of abundance and wealth, and that that's kind of obvious as well. Vacations, this state is a place of luxury for a lot of people, you know and it's just so interesting to me to combine that with Moon and Capricorn, so humble and grounded for so many people. So many people are just down to earth, but then we've also got that abundance and luxury aspect as well. But what's interesting is that Venus in Aquarius is combined with Neptune. Venus and Neptune are conjunct at 24 degrees. It's a pretty tight conjunction. Venus at 24 degrees Aquarius, 12 minutes. Neptune at 24 degrees, 8 minutes of Aquarius. Very, very close. So let's see. And Venus also shows, not only pleasure and abundance, but a lot of it does relate to wealth, I think, or income. And maybe, I don't know if you can see where I'm going with this, but Neptune combined with Venus, Venus combined with Neptune, to me would indicate some kind of fraud or deception or illusion when it comes to wealth. So the way I relate that is, this state is known for a lot of fraud and a lot of, I don't know, like insurance fraud or people, starting businesses and being kind of shady. And I think that's part of the openness. That's maybe a less attractive side of the freedom that comes with Gemini Rising and Pisces Sun. There's a lot of freedom and openness there, which is really great in some areas. But then there is a lot of kind of fraud, deception, that type of thing. Maybe tax evasion, I don't really know. But yeah, the Venus conjunct Neptune, that makes a lot of sense. Deception, illusion with finances. And I don't know how much that applies to the state level, like on a governmental level. But I do know, Florida has some of the highest, car insurance rates, for instance, just because there is so much fraud and, theft at times. Yeah, it's just part of that freedom. It's just, people, and it's also part of, so many people coming here from other areas. They can take advantage of that sort of freedom to do that type of thing. But otherwise, on a more positive level, Venus conjunct Neptune, especially in such a prominent place, could also be maybe like finances or abundance coming from creativity, imagination, media, or like entertainment. Neptune can be, I don't know, movies or media as well. So and maybe there's some untapped potential there as well. I don't think Florida is known for its cinema, film industry or anything like that, or its entertainment, but that could be an area of abundance in the future. Let's see what else. Let's talk about some less glamorous aspects. So Saturn is in ninth house Aquarius, so this shows that, like, this is so interesting because there's some very contradictory parts of the chart. I already talked about how there's so much packed in the 10th house, so that shows a really blessed reputation, especially abroad, with the other states or maybe internationally, a really prominent and, powerful, energetic reputation, and a reputation of wealth and abundance. So there's all that going on. However, at the same time, two placements in particular to me show that this state may have a difficult or challenging time having relations with other, entities, other maybe states or countries. One would be Saturn in ninth house Aquarius, and the other would be Mars in seventh house Sagittarius. Let's see. So Saturn in ninth house Aquarius, I could read this a couple different ways. One would be that this state would be kind of reluctant to adapt to new belief systems or new ideologies. Saturn, ninth house is kind of belief systems, ideologies, higher knowledge, so to speak. And Saturn is very slow to change. It's, Saturn's a bit skeptical. It doesn't like to hop on the bandwagon of anything. It likes to take its time, maybe be kind of independent and, move on to the next step when it is ready. And that can take a long time. So it makes sense that, Florida is a kind of conservative state. It would be reluctant to jump onto any new belief systems, any new ideologies. It would be, maybe a few years back in time compared to other, parts of the country or parts of the world. It would be conservative, for lack of a better word. The Saturn in the ninth house, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. Also, Mars. Oh, okay. I forgot. I keep getting distracted. Okay, but then Saturn, ninth house, Aquarius. Ninth house, to me, ninth house doesn't just relate to beliefs and higher knowledge. It does pertain to all of that, but it's so close to the midheaven that to me it does impact the career for a normal person reading. But in this case, it does impact the reputation as well. It does impact how like back in the day, ninth house was the church because everything was the church. Your reputation a lot of times did largely consist of how you related to the church or what your activities were in the church, because the church was like everything. The church was society basically. So nowadays, ninth house is higher knowledge and belief systems, all that, but I think it does relate to partially the reputation as well. So anyway, with Saturn in the ninth house Aquarius, especially Aquarius, which is such a social sign and a holistic or global sign, it does pertain to how you relate to the community, so to speak, or the world. So Saturn in ninth house Aquarius, it would show Florida would take time to develop its reputation or its relations with other entities, and it could be challenging at first. So and that makes a lot of sense right there, because there was a lot of challenging I think there was a long time of challenges with I think Florida was one of the most conservative, so to speak, states, along with South Carolina and I want to say Alabama, in terms of like civil rights. They really kind of held back on that, and there's Jim Crow and all that. I don't want to get super far into that, but that does mark a really challenging time where Florida was in the minority on that, I think, and maybe kind of against the rest of the country on a lot of those issues, and it was taking a really controversial stance. And I really don't want to weigh in on that. I don't want to get into that. This isn't a history video. I'm just saying that's one example of how Florida did have kind of a really challenging, long development in its relations. And now we can see it's such a prominent state, such a visible state or well-known region. But for so long, it did take a long time to develop, and there were a lot of challenges. It was provocative and controversial. It didn't really, fit with the other states. It didn't get along, so to speak, on a national or international level. So that makes sense. There'd be a lot of challenges there. It'd be a bumpy road for sure. And then, also Mars in seventh house Sagittarius. Sagittarius is, of course, a sign kind of pertaining to international travel or, broadening your perspective, gaining knowledge or experiences to broaden your perspective or expand your soul, so to speak. And seventh house in particular pertains to relationships, one-on-one interactions. And for a state, I would see this as being interactions of trade, with other states or countries, or just international like relations or interstate relations. And with Mars there, it would show Florida as being maybe aggressive at times or competitive, maybe a little bit belligerent or dominant, overbearing, domineering. All these kind of words come to mind with Mars there. On the other hand, it could show that this state would react kind of quickly at times. I know that's contradictory because I just said it would take a long time to develop. Now that's very true. We can see that, but at the same time, it may be very quick to act on a diplomatic level with other states or countries, if that makes sense. So it may kind of rush things. It may rush its relations with other states or countries. And honestly, I don't know how true that is. Maybe if you're watching, maybe you have more information than I do. But Mars in seventh house Sagittarius to me would kind of suggest that. And let's jump around a bit here. There's placements in Aries and actually Taurus that I wanted to get into. So we see the north node is at 29 degrees Scorpio. This means that the south node is 29 Taurus. So this too, similar to the Capricorn Moon, shows that this state actually has a, agrarian focus with Taurus. Taurus is earthy. So there's actually a, a conservative and kind of earthy focus. So this to me would be, I think of like farming. And especially the south node pertains to the past and the upbringing, the history or the past. And so the state definitely, between the Taurus south node and the Capricorn Moon, the state would have a very long, very kind of stable agrarian upbringing. It would be very challenging on a international or interstate level, like I said, with Saturn in ninth house Aquarius. But internally, it would be relatively stable, I would think, for its upbringing and conservative, agrarian, that type of thing. Let's see. And I think South Node in Taurus, it would show that it would be independent as well. So maybe, for a lot of its history, Florida was kind of isolated geographically. It was just kind of on its own and supported itself. And that makes sense too with a lot of farmers here. I don't know how historically accurate this is. I'm kind of speculating a little bit, but with South Node in Taurus, I would speculate that Florida would be kind of self-sustaining for much of its history. That I don't know, it'd be a lot of farmers just kind of supporting themselves, kind of quiet, conventional, conservative, etc. Okay, let's go a different direction with these Aries placements. So there's also a lot of planets in Aries. Now they're all kind of outer planets, but there is Jupiter, Uranus, and Pluto all in Aries. Now, Jupiter in Aries would show a kind of inflated ego or self esteem. So, this to me would indicate a lot of pride, a lot of state pride, especially on an international or communal level, since Jupiter, well, pretty much all of Aries is in the 11th house. 11th house has to do with how you fit into the group or the community. And again, since this is a state we're talking about, this would be how Florida or Floridians fit into their country or their entire world. How does the state fit into the larger community? So Jupiter in 11th house of Aries shows that there'd be a lot of pride, a lot of maybe kind of ego, a lot of confidence in the state. And that makes sense too. I mean, we can see there's a lot of state pride, I think. Uranus in 11th house, I mean, these are all such different planets, Pluto, Jupiter, and Uranus. But Uranus in 11th house Aries shows that, this state wouldn't be afraid to kind of make an impact or be different, be strange or weird. And that's pretty obvious. Like, there's a lot of weird stories. And I don't know, maybe on the one hand, Floridians are embarrassed by that aspect, but on another side, they kind of embrace that as well as a state. So you can see that with Uranus in Aries. Uranus in Aries is almost, maybe the most ideal placement for being an individual, for being provocative and different and unique. So that would go into the reputation as well, and that I feel like makes a lot of sense. We can all kind of see that. And then lastly, maybe the hardest to define would be Pluto in Aries. This would show, okay, so this would be almost like a hidden, intense side. That would be maybe less known, not as visible, but there'd be an intensity there. But I just want to remind you that really, there's so many planets clustered here. I mean, all the planets are visible. They're all in the top half of the chart. So again, this is a very well-known state, as a huge reputation. But also specifically, almost all the planets are in the 10th and 11th houses. And then we've just got 3, Mars, Moon, and Saturn, in the 7th through 9th houses. So the 10th and 11th houses, like I always say, like for a person, if you want to be a celebrity, you want to have a lot of planets in the 10th house and also the 11th house, because these are the most visible, they're the most public parts of the chart, being at the top of the chart. And 11th house, since it's, any planets in the 11th house are rising. And it's sort of the beginning of the cycle because it goes backwards. So the planets rise in the 12th house and then they go 11th, 10th, 9th, etc. So 12th house, planets are kind of sleepy, so to speak. They're just rising. They've just kind of woken up, so to speak. But by the 11th house, they're very visible in the sky, but also they still have that energy. They still have the rest of the cycle to go. So the 11th house is extremely prominent, extremely visible and public. And then 10th house is, of course, at the very top by the midheavens. That's the most public. But really, 10th and 11th houses are both very prominent, especially for public relations, so career or reputation. Anyway, so in this case, I mean, when I'm saying that there's maybe a mysterious dark side to the reputation for the state, I think there is. I think that's definitely there, but you have to keep in mind this is combining with all these other things, the ego and the pride, the expansion that's brought on by Jupiter, the strangeness and uniqueness, weirdness brought on by Uranus, maybe also the kind of shifts in thinking or thinking outside the box. You've got general energy and activity, vitality brought by the sun in the 10th house, the technological, informational influence brought by Mercury, the wealth and abundance with Venus, and then the kind of fraud or deception, the illusion brought on by Neptune. So there's all of that is tightly integrated into this state's reputation. I mean, so that makes sense when you kind of boil it down. Florida is known for so many different things. Um, so yeah, and I'm just gonna end this by going back to the basics here. The ascendant and the chart ruler are Gemini Rising, which is ruled by Mercury in 10th house Aquarius. So this shows a surprisingly technological and informational potential, I think, that I honestly don't think has yet been reached. There is that already, but I think there's potential as well. And actually, one last little thing, two things, two last things I have to talk about. I almost forgot to talk about the Leo IC, and this is interesting because it's a dynamic state, so I want to make sure I articulate it correctly. This would show, well, okay, so combining South Node Leo with, or excuse me, South Node Taurus with IC and Leo, and then combining that especially with the Moon and Capricorn, all three of these placements in any chart would kind of show, one's upbringing or history, past, etc., their foundation. So combining all of those, on the one hand, you've got South Node and Taurus with Moon and Capricorn, so this shows a slow, steady upbringing, one that was maybe challenging and humble, very down to earth. On the other hand, though, you've got IC and Leo, which is very different. So this would show, a fierce kind of independence. All three of these energies are very independent. So that's one thread that kind of links them all. So this state would be very independent, even from the get-go, very independent upbringing. And that would evolve into this, very kind of flourishing and unique, eccentric attitude that we can see today. But the Leo IC also shows that, this state would be not just independent, but it would be, I don't know, known to be provocative or different, to be like a celebrity as well. Leo is, very, very outgoing sign. But then there's a fire influence as well with Leo. And that leads me to the last thing I wanted to say, which is, I've even thought living here that you have such a combination of all four of the elements. Obviously there's the water that we talked about. There's water all around. There's so many lakes as well. So you've got the Gulf, the Atlantic Ocean, so many lakes and rivers. And then you've got the hurricanes and the humidity. So there's obviously so much water. You've got the earth with all the farming, the trees, the wetlands, the Everglades, for instance. So much striking beauty with the earth as well. And so many animals that live here that I never knew about before I moved here. You've got the fire, obviously. It's a warm, hot state. It's subtropical. Parts of it are actually tropical. It's a long, hot summer. So that makes sense with there's 3 planets in Aries. You've got Mars and Sagittarius, and then IC and Leo that are all bringing the fire. And then there's the air focus as well. We've got the wind kind of coming in from the Atlantic, and I think wind probably, or air, maybe less of a focus than the other, water, fire, and earth. But even air as well. The state is so flat that the sky is visibly large. The sky kind of consumes you here, being in such a flat state. So you're kind of at the mercy of not only the sun with the fire, but also the air, the weather, etc. So really there's a a strong influence from all four elements, which, looking at the chart, I think makes a lot of sense because you've got water sun with earth moon with air rising, air chart ruler, and then the fire is actually surprisingly not as influential in this chart, I think. But you do definitely have it with multiple planets in Aries, Sagittarius, and then IC and Leo. So the IC and Leo would show, I don't know, a consistent, like the heat would almost be part of the foundation here. It would be very consistent, but it would be almost kind of in the background at the same time, since it's not an overwhelming dominance in this chart here. And that makes sense too because although Florida is very hot and tropical by United States standards, it's not necessarily by international standards. Outside the country, there are definitely hotter, more tropical places. So yeah, very interesting. But all in all, it's such a dynamic chart. One that's very open, libertarian, but also conservative and humble. But it's humble, but it's also flashy and making an impression at the same time. So really, it's such an intricate mess of energies. I hope I articulated it half accurately. I feel like I'd be satisfied with that. But yeah, let me know if you thought this was interesting or if you have any suggestions of other topics you'd like me to cover. I'd be happy to take suggestions. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.